بارك على نبينا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. The second episode within this 7-episode series, pointing out the obvious. And over the last few years, actually, this is not something that started very recently, but it's been going on for a few years. What I've been trying to do, to the best of my ability, is to re-centralize our focus as Muslims upon the fundamentals, just the basics of what Islam is about. I feel, or what I observe really, in our communities in general, and amongst people who accept Islam or people who start to commit to Islam, is that they immediately get caught up within all of these detailed, controversial aspects of the faith. Like immediately they dive head first into an ocean of controversies and details and difference of opinions, and really they end up missing really the basics of what Islam is about. And the topic today, conspiracies, there's a reason that I'm talking about it. People, so how many, I think we have what, 2,000 videos or so on the YouTube, it's on 2,000 videos. We could have 10,000 videos, it doesn't matter. As long as I'm not saying anything outrageous, no one cares. I have to say something outrageous, absolutely outside of what is seen as the norm. I think we had a few experiences with this even amongst the group that does the shorts and the reels and whatnot. I'm not on social media like the way I should be, but apparently there are 2 videos that got traction, and both of them were snapshots or small reels that were taken out of context. One of them is where I talked once about the Khabib's punch and how he took out Conor McGregor, and that was like whatever, and it turned into this huge, and it was like I don't know how many thousand views. And why? Because it sounded outrageous. The way it was kind of removed from a contextual rant that was going on, and it just sounded outrageous. And people care for things that are outrageous. They don't care for anything that's simple or clear or basic or fundamental. People just don't care about that. And that's a problem, of course. And when we talk about the general public, okay, I can't control that. But as Muslims, for Muslims at least, this should not be your interest. You shouldn't be only listening to people who are saying things that are absolutely insane, something that makes no sense at all, and then suddenly they catch your eye or catch your ear, and now you can listen to it even more. People who say outrageous things, they know why they're doing it. Like they have a reason for why they do it, and it comes with a specific personality trait, and it comes with a specific agenda that is attached to it. That usually means that the goal here is not education, and it's not raising awareness, it's something very different, and you're playing right into the hand of the person who's doing it. So you have to be very careful with these type of, this type of exposure. And that is just the reality of how we are as human beings. We will tend to ignore things that are right in front of us, that are extremely simple, very clear, very helpful, and look for any aspects that are things that are not, that are exciting, for the lack of a better word here. Which is why there are so many controversies with Islam that are famous, like well known. You'll find a Muslim that's maybe 10, 12 years old that doesn't necessarily even know what to say in salah appropriately, but knows the age of Aisha when she got married. Yeah? And he knows that there are certain punishments in Islam that can be, that the hand can come off if you steal. They know details. Why are you even, who told you this? Where did you even get this piece of information? At what point in your Islamic education did you arrive that this piece of information was shared with you? The historians of Islam that are deeply specialized in understanding the seerah will spend decades researching one of these topics and debating and conversing over it. And yet, a Muslim who doesn't even know ahkam as-salah appropriately, doesn't know what would invalidate their prayer, has this information. And this tells you that this is the nature of the human being, where we crave a part of it. The nafs craves outrageous information, right? And conspiracies fall right under that category. Conspiracies. This is a problem within our nation, for sure. And it's a problem across the world now. Like in the world that we live in, conspiracies and conspiracy theory has grown, has grown on a scale that I don't think the world has ever witnessed before. Even before the era of technology, when conspiracies or conspiracy theory was something that happened often because people picked up rumors and didn't have any way to validate information or verify that what they were told is actually truthful. I believe even today we still have more of these conspiracy theories. And I'm not here to bash them really, just so you understand my approach. I'm not here just to say that they're all wrong. No. I think as Muslims we have to pick up the balanced approach to how to deal with things like these. And this is why I'm giving it its own episode to kind of discuss it a little bit, and hopefully I need to develop an understanding amongst all of us of how to go by it. As every episode, I'll start out with just with a statement. A statement that I think summarizes what I'm going to be talking about and what I believe the understanding should be. Obviously, our enemies will conspire against us. Hence their names. Their name is enemies. Of course they're going to conspire against us. We expect nothing less. This is the norm. For you to live in a world where you think that it's appropriate for you to have an enemy and they don't conspire against you means you don't really understand how the world works to begin with. Also, obviously, we must be aware of these conspiracies. We must be prepared for them. We have to understand that we are responsible by the nature of being Muslim, by nature of standing for something. We are responsible for overcoming these conspiracies or overcoming these plans or plots against us. At the end, they are conspiracies. They're not divine decree. They're not divine in nature. They're just a conspiracy. It's just someone who's trying to plot against you one way or the other. They're not divine. This is not something that you do not have, there's no way to overcome. There's no way to defeat it. There's no way to actually put up the proper protections and checks and balances in for it. No. We cannot blame conspiracies and those who conspire against us for our own mistakes and our own shortcomings. This is the approach that I think we should be taking towards this topic in general. Too often, we spend our time and our focus and our energy complaining about conspiracies, complaining about those who conspire against us, about those who are behind-the-scene groups of power and wealth and status that are very diabolically sitting behind screens, and they are moving the world in whatever direction they want to move it in, and that we are absolutely helpless. We have no ability to actually do anything with this because it's all rigged. It's rigged from beyond our ability to even understand. So there's no point in really, See, this narrative is a narrative that is extremely problematic. One of the quotes that I love regarding this topic is by Tim Crater, and you don't have to like the guy at all, but I do like the quote. He said, we tend to make up stories, and here he's referring to conspiracies in general. We tend to make up stories in the same circumstances in which people come up with conspiracy theories. When we have ignorance and when we feel powerless. When we don't know enough about the topic, or we feel overwhelmed. So we tend to make up stories. And that is where conspiracies come from, and that's where a lot of myths and superstitions and fear come from, just these two basic problems. And I'm going to talk about them in detail in a moment. And they share the same flawed premise as most conspiracy theories do. Like our stories that we make up in moments of powerlessness and ignorance, they share the same premise of conspiracy theories in general. That the world is way more well-planned and organized than it really is. Where we believe that someone, aside from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're not talking about the divine subhanahu wa ta'ala, we believe that there are a lot of people, others who are planning things out really well. It's really well organized, and that's why everything. You honestly look at what's happening today and think that there's a group of people who are really well organized and they're making steps towards some outcome. That's your reading of the world. And if you look at the world today, let's say that there is a group, and that group hates you. They ain't doing too well. Like if they don't like you, they're not doing that well. Like they're really not getting, they're losing a lot of ground, really. Like they have not steered the world in a direction where they got what they want. What do they want, really? It's unclear. If they do want something. So when we allow ourselves to believe this, and we allow ourselves to, we indulge ourselves within this way of thought or this narrative, there are certain problems that are going to come up, which is what we're going to talk about, inshallah, today to the best of our ability. So where do conspiracy theories come from? And of course, this is an oversimplification of a huge problem. But I'm going to share with you these four sources that I think are worthy of contemplation. Number one, ignorance. Number two, powerlessness. Number three, laziness. And number four, reality. And we'll leave the best for last, but let's talk about the first three. When you are ignorant of something, meaning you don't understand it, because ignorance is such a scary thing. The human being is the enemy of that which he does not understand or does not comprehend. It's just how we are. We don't understand it, so we immediately put ourselves in the position of opposing it. It's natural. It's a part of nature. Any mammal in nature, any creature in nature, If something is brought to its attention that it doesn't understand, it will take the stance of opposing it, of being its enemy. Why? Because it doesn't want to run the risk of harm. That's how we are rigged by nature. This is the programming that you have inside of you. You don't understand it, so you're going to take caution. You're going to be cautious regarding it. Being cautious leads to eventually being an enemy, because you're not welcoming and you're not opening up your arms, which is very wise. Let's be honest, it's very wise to do so. You should not be welcoming something you don't understand, is not clear to you, it's not familiar to you. You have no familiarity with it. But what the problem with that is that we're very uncomfortable with ignorance. We're very uncomfortable as human beings. And that lack of comfort within a domain of ignorance, or within a specific compartment of ignorance, will lead us to try and fill that void with information. Even if that means that I'm going to make things up. Even if it means I'm going to make things up, I'm going to draw conclusions from introductions or premises that are not correct, are not truthful, they don't make any sense, or there is no concrete or clear evidence to support my conclusion. But I'd rather a false conclusion where I can at least feel a little bit more safe regarding this compartment that I don't understand than sitting with ignorance. One of the most important parts of learning as a Muslim is learning to say la a'lam, right? This is like the nusful ilmi la adri, as they say. Half of knowledge is saying I don't know. Why? Because you're not supposed to be happy with ignorance. You're supposed to be comfortable with it. It's different. Happiness means you're content with the fact that you don't know. You shouldn't be content with not knowing. At least that which you can know. At least that which knowing will help you, will benefit you in your life. Sometimes knowing things are not beneficial, so there's no point in knowing them. It doesn't matter. You can be happy not knowing it. But if something is beneficial to you, it will help you improve or progress, it will grant you some degree of prosperity or protect you from harm, then you should know it. You should have that knowledge. But you need to be comfortable with not knowing. You should be able to be stable and to be functional without knowing, because if you're not, then your nafs will start filling in the gaps. I talk about this in Tazkiyah a lot. Filling in the gaps. I don't know, so I'll fill in the gaps myself. Someone walks in, I don't know the person, but they stand out a little bit. So immediately, what my nafs wants to do is it wants to observe and start judging. Start figuring out, based on the way their height, their weight, the way they dress, the way they're walking, the first thing that comes out of their mouths. I don't know anything about this person. I have no idea about where this person came from, to what circumstances they were born, what environment they grew up in, what challenges they had, what trauma they went through, what hopes or ambitions. I know nothing about them, but I don't mind filling in the gaps about them. There's no problem. And then concluding that this person is arrogant, or this person is a little bit too cocky, or a little bit too aggressive, or a little bit too this, a little bit too, breaking down a human being with all of their might into a word or two, just so that I don't have to deal with the uncomfortableness of not knowing them. Just because I'm not comfortable just saying, I don't know, I have no idea who this person is. Now, the Islamic way to do it is either you don't make any assumptions about them at all, and be totally comfortable with just not knowing, or if you're going to make assumptions or you can fill in the gaps, then do that with khair. Fill in the gaps in a good way, unless you're responsible. And I've talked about this a number of times. If you're the security guard, don't do that. If your job is a security guard, then don't do that. Assume the worst in everyone that you don't know, because that's how you protect us. If you're responsible for someone, don't assume the best when they do something suspicious. Assume the worst, because you're responsible for their upbringing, for their mentorship. But outside of that, then really just assume the best if you have to assume. Ignorance is one of the main sources, if not the main source, of all conspiracy theories that exist in the world. Because we're just not comfortable not knowing. Who is in charge of the world? We don't know. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the Illuminati, because it makes sense. It gives us something to hold on to. It gives us something to point our finger to. And it's interesting, I've given this lecture before. And I made a mistake once, and I gave it in the wrong group, and I didn't finish it. Like I wasn't able to complete it. I was stopped. Say, no, you don't have no idea what you're talking about. Of course it's the Illuminati. Of course it's them. Here's this, and then they go on showing me evidence. Like they want to actually prove that, no, I'm wrong by what I'm saying. Proving my point, but not letting me finish my lecture. Proving the point that I was trying to make, just not allowing me to finish the lecture that I wanted to finish. Because if you get caught up to that degree in things, if you get so caught up into that there are groups on this planet that are controlling everything, they're diabolical in nature, and they have preciseness and perfection in their execution, they're almost flawless and they almost make no mistakes at all, then it's very hard for you to function really in a healthy way in the world. And you will always continue to feel the second source, which is powerless. Powerlessness is a very, very serious disease that we have as Muslims today. I find this is one of the aspects that we can change about ourselves. Feeling powerless. You're never powerless. That's why it's a disease. You are never powerless, ever. Even if you are tied up and thrown into a cell somewhere, you are not powerless. Even if they strip you from everything, all of your tools, you're still not powerless. As long as you are breathing, you still have something to offer. And you have some impact. It may not be as big as you want it to be. You may not reach as far as you want to reach, but you have something to offer. And the feeling of powerlessness is ajiz, which is the word for it in Arabic, and the terminology in Islam. Al-ajiz is actually a terminology you find in the books of tazkiyah. They talk about this concept. Is an illusion that the shaitan gives you. He wants you to feel powerless, because when you feel powerless, then you're less likely to try anything. You're less likely to take a stand. You're less likely to put in the effort, because what's the point? If there's no hope, if I am powerless, if my enemy is absolutely stronger than me in every way, and I cannot beat them, then why waste my energy? Why waste my energy on this? Why would I burn myself and No, I wouldn't do it. Khalas, I just let it go. I let the whole thing go. And then I go and I complain about things. And complaining is safe. It's a safe area. And it allows me to build upon my innate feel of powerlessness. As an ummah today, we feel to a certain degree powerless. We really do. Especially, I think we realized that a little bit when October 7 occurred and what happened afterwards. When the bombarding began to the Strip, and we watched people in the thousands die within weeks. And we felt how powerless we were. I mean, we lacked impact. But, alhamdulillah, what ended up happening is that instead of people sitting back and just complaining about things, there was a movement. At least the next generation, they moved towards trying to achieve whatever they could. So they camped outside of their universities, and people started posting on social media, and others started advocating within legislative bodies within the different parts of different countries of the world. So they tried doing something, and doing those things may have not changed the reality completely, but it did move the needle. It did shift the public opinion on things to a certain degree. Most of the time, because of the way we are as human beings, we are not okay with baby step changes. We don't like those. We want change that is monumental. We want to go from minus 100 to plus 100 within a couple of days. We want our efforts to be so impactful that it's going to absolutely change the reality of the world. When the reality is, or the truth is, that that's not how things work. That I will spend the entirety of my life, and so will you. The entirety of your life. You will dedicate all of your life for this cause. And you will maybe push things one step ahead, maybe. A couple of millimeters, that's it. But how change happens is that there's a lot of people doing this. Is that we are not alone. We are part of an ummah, nation, a group of people that are in the hundreds of millions. And if everyone is dedicating their lives and pushing it a millimeter, with a couple of 100 million people, you're making change. It's just that your effort, personally, yourself, is not going to be to that degree. And when people understand that and see that, and feel that, yes, I don't have the ability to actually fix the problem, then they understand that or translate that to themselves internally as being powerless. As being powerless, as being those who do not have the ability to make any change at all, because they're not happy with these small baby step changes. So make sure that you are aware of powerlessness. You're never powerless, ever. You always have the ability to impact to some degree. You always do. You never know what your words may do. You never know, and that goes back to the concept that I explained yesterday of Ahl al-Kahf. You never know. Maybe the smallest amount of effort can have an impact that you can't even imagine today. But you have to be okay with the fact that your impact may be very small. And it may not occur within your lifetime. The third reason, or the third source of conspiracy theories or conspiracy is laziness. Is just plain laziness. Instead of actually learning appropriately, obtaining knowledge, and figuring things out, it's just easier if I make something up, or if I accept a theory that has less effort put into it, but allows me to put that whole problem aside. I don't have to think about it anymore. Lack of effort, lack of the willingness to learn things is laziness at the end. And this is where we end up with all these conspiracy theories. People who don't want to spend the time actually learning how the world works. When you understand how the world works, you figure out that it's way more complex than you think. That for the theory of just a handful of people moving everything is absolutely insane. That's not how things work. It's way more complicated than that. It's way more complex on every level. There are so many strings being pulled in different directions by everyone that's alive. And the sum of it all is where we are right now. And it's really, yes, there are people who have influence. Yes, there are people who have impact, and people who run countries, and people who own banks, and people who have a lot of money, and people who have armies under there. Fine. But to think that this is happening without resistance, that they are capable of making any decision that they want, it's just a lazy way of looking at the world. It's lazy. And it's going to feed into, I'm going to explain to you why it's a problem in a moment, because it's all about what it does to you. This session today is really focused on what these beliefs do for you, like how they affect you. At the end, it doesn't matter. I don't care what people believe, what they don't believe, but I do care what those beliefs do to you and how they affect you. And in Islam, it's important. In Islam, what you believe is very, very critical. It's important because it makes a difference, because we know that what you believe results in values, and values results in attitudes and behaviors and actions and a way of life. So if you have beliefs that are wrong or that are problematic or have deficits within them, that is going to translate into a deficit in behavior, a deficit in attitude and in mentality. And that's where we all suffer. We all suffer because of a bad belief, because of a lazy way of understanding the world that we live in. No one wants to spend time reading and learning. And sometimes you have to go beyond that. You have to go to people who have experience, have knowledge, and sit with them and learn from them. That was the only way, by the way. I miss those days. Those were good days. Those were good days. If you wanted to learn something, you had to get into a car or on a plane. You have to go somewhere. You have to go and wait in line until the person is willing to talk to you, or attend, push and shove to get into a session so you can listen to someone who knows what they're talking about. Now you just have to flick with your thumb on YouTube, right? And when you do that, you don't even know who you're getting. You're getting everybody. You're getting people you're getting someone sitting in their parents' basement, covered in Doritos, just talking, just running their mouths, because they have nothing else to do with a false background. And you're listening to them. And this person probably hasn't left the house in a couple of weeks. This person doesn't have proper relationships to begin with in their lives, but you're listening to them. And this is a problem. It's a problem that we've allowed people. See, back in the day, to speak in a majlis, to speak in a gathering, required years of volunteering and work and dedication and service. You had to be favored by people who had status and had knowledge. It took a while. Like, you couldn't just walk into a group of men, and I'm talking about this specifically because I saw this myself. You can't walk into a group of men and start talking. They will immediately silence you and throw you out and yell at your father for not raising you appropriately. Because you don't walk in and just start talking. You have to earn the right to be able to speak. The world used to have this hierarchy. It was a good hierarchy. It has its flaws. It has its flaws, for sure. But it was a good hierarchy because you had to prove yourself before you were going to be able to give your opinion. Now that's not the case. Social media has leveled the playing ground. Anyone can speak and be listened to and be heard, even though they are full of nonsense and they have not proven their ability to actually share information that has any credibility to it. And they can become president too. They can become the president of the strongest country in the world just by literally BSing their way through it. By lying, committing to their lies, answering every question with a bigger lie, and just lying their way to their graves. They don't mind. We have arrived at a point in history where this is a problem now. It used to be, لولا المشقة ساد الناس كلهم. الجود يفقر والإقدام قتال. المتنبي used to say. If it wasn't for the fact that it was difficult, everyone would be a chief. Being generous makes you poor, and being courageous puts you at risk of death. It's people who were generous and courageous that became chiefs. People who spoke, but they ran the risk. They were generous. They gave their wealth, and that they put them at risk. That put them at risk of being poor. They were courageous, putting that at risk of losing their lives. Now all it takes is a camera and an internet connection, and suddenly you can just say enough outrageous things to get attention, and then you can go ahead. The fourth source of conspiracy theories, which is the one that I want you to understand that I do recognize, is reality. Reality, people are conspiring against each other. That is a reality. In reality, you have done this too. You have done this as well. You have sat with a group of friends, upset with someone and what they're doing, and talked about what we should do to push back against them. You have done this at some point. If at school, you've done it at school. I'm sure you've done it at school. You didn't like someone, there was somebody. We do it all the time. How far we take it is just the question of how committed we are to this problem. That's all. It's just whether we're committed to this or we don't really care. But everyone, at some point in their lives, will conspire. Will think about, well, I don't like what they're doing. I think it's wrong. I think it needs to be corrected. I think it needs to be removed. I think it's harmful. We have to push back. So we start conspiring, thinking of ways to undermine their efforts, a way to strengthen your own effort and put it, make it more apparent than theirs. That's what conspiring is. Because there is conspiring in reality, conspiracy theories are born. Not every conspiracy theory is wrong. Some of them are correct. Some of them, yes, there's actually a group of people who conspired to try and ruin something. And they were either successful or they were flawed in their approach and they failed. But it's not the idea to say, for me to sit here and say, there are no conspiracy theories that are correct. That is naive. That lacks wisdom and that's not real. Of course there are, but not at the pace and the level and the degree that we carry today. Not even remotely close to what we have today. This is a concept, this is a topic within life that requires a lot of checks and balances. It requires a healthy approach to it. If you are too loose on the topic, then you are going to fall into the trap of believing every conspiracy theory, which will lead you to a certain degree of powerlessness and a number of other consequences that I'm going to explain to you in a few moments. And if you don't believe any of them, it means you're not really, you're too naive and you're going to fail. You're going to be bitten. You're going to be hurt and harmed. I mean, if you have a couple of children, you don't tell them the truth all the time. If you have a few children, I have 3 kids. We rarely ever tell them exactly what's going on. Rarely. Almost never. I can't imagine that the government is telling me everything. Of course they're not. Of course they're not telling us everything. Of course. Why would they? If I were in their position, I wouldn't do it either. You know how easy it is to make the public panic? It's very simple. It takes very little effort. Actually, most of the effort is making sure the public doesn't panic, because there may be an actual conspiracy occurring, but if the public panics, then we're in a bigger problem altogether. So we know that already. We know that you're not going to be told everything as it is. You accept that as a part of being alive, as a part of being a part of a country where there is governance and there are enemies who are conspiring against you. So there are some conspiracy theories that will be correct. The difference between a mind there's a difference between the 2 types of minds, those who are susceptible to these theories and those who have the proper approach to it, which is what I want to share with you today. So just to historically point this out, this is just taken straight out of Wikipedia. Conspiracy theories go as back in history as we can probably document it. When Nero, the known Roman Empire, committed suicide a couple of decades after Isa alayhi salam's story, because he burned Rome down to the ground and he had lost his mind, the conspiracies about his death continued to grow for decades after he died. People believing that he faked his death and now he's living on an island somewhere and he's going to come back at some point and punish all those who showed people continued to be scared of him for years. And the conspiracy theories grew for decades and decades and decades after his suicide, after he died, until they were so far out from his death that even if he was alive, he would be dead by now anyways. Like until it kept on going until he's a bit. Anyone here know about Elvis, or Hitler, or there Tupac? You have all these. It was all fake. They're living somewhere disguised in a small village in Mexico or somewhere, and they're living there, and they continue to believe this, searching for them, until we're like, well, even if they were alive now, they'd be like 115. So I don't know how sane or how they'll be probably senile, no point. And that's the only time when the conspiracy theories kind of die off. Otherwise, this is a known human behavior. Why? It's because they were so scared of him. He was a dictator. He burnt their city down to the ground. He was someone who was absolutely insane. He was medically insane. And they were so scared of him that they would make these myths up. And why? Because you're better safe than not. So a conspiracy theory allows for that safety. You keep your guard up, even though there's no evidence to support this at all. Even though you have no way to verify it, and actually the evidence is the opposite of it, but I'd rather believe something that keeps me safe than something that allows me to put my guard down. And this is just the reality of how we function as human beings. And when you look at at modern day conspiracy theories, right? It goes on and on and on. Whether we're talking about UFOs or talking about you're too young to know JFK and his assassination. But when you look at these things, conspiracies, these are people sitting in dark rooms, conniving. They control things. They take out. Yeah. Vaccines. Vaccines was a conspiracy, right? It's a conspiracy. Vaccines. Yes. Let's bring back polio. Let's do that. Let's allow children to dangle from the waist down, die in infancy. Why do these theories come out? They come out for a couple of complex problems. One of them is that when someone talks about something with full certainty and lack of evidence, their theory or their narrative has a hole, and if their narrative has a hole in it, then the conspiracy theorist will use that. So for example, when we talk about vaccines, because that's a good example, I think it's a good one. Vaccines is a medical miracle, really. The population on Earth increased after three things happened. After OB-GYN figured out how to keep women alive when they gave birth, when antibiotics came out and people stopped dying from basic infections, and when we came up with vaccines. These three things allowed the population to go from a couple of 100 million to 8 billion, and then we're projected to see numbers go even higher, because people are living longer and they're not dying earlier. When we talk about vaccines, it's a medical discovery. Medicine is not perfect. There are holes in medicine. There's always issues, there's always problems in everything within medicine. There's not one medication that comes without a long list of side effects. Long list, meaning if you buy the thing and you go home and you open it up and you take out the paper, don't throw it out. It's this big, right? But open it up. It'll turn into a map. It's this big, and side effects, because we've tried them out, and yeah, every once in a while someone can get a really bad side effect with this stuff. We know that. We know that everything within medicine is like that. Vaccines are no different. But when you come out and you talk about vaccines, and you fail to point out that every once in a while someone's going to get a really bad side effect, a child can actually die from it. One in a couple of million times, it can happen. If they're susceptible, if there's a mistake, it can happen. When you don't point that out, and a conspiracy theorist mind picks that up, khalas, you've given them the hole that they need. And they will make that hole the focus, the single focus. Absolutely ignoring the hundreds of millions of lives that were saved with the same vaccine. Like the hundreds of millions of lives that exist today because they took these vaccines. And then what ends up happening is people believe it, and then people don't take it, and people get very, very sick, and then they die. And then public health is ruined, and then we go back into this horrible whirlhole. So I love this. Chapman University is it's an interesting institution. I'm not necessarily supporting it, but they put out this in 2016. And what are the fears, the American fears? What are the highest American fears? In 2016, it was still 9/11. It was still that 9/11 was a conspiracy. And this is where my lecture last time ended. This is where I was halted, I was stopped, and it was explained to me that it was absolutely a conspiracy all made up. I don't know if it is or if it isn't. And I don't care if it was or if it was not. What I do care is about the mindset that allows these thoughts to exist, what that leads to in terms of behaviors and practices, and what the claim is being based upon, like what we're basing our claims upon. This process is what I'm interested in. I have no problem with someone having critique of vaccines, for example. When we talk about a medical physicians who are specialized in vaccines, critiquing a specific vaccine and saying it can be done better, that's not a problem, because that's not a conspiracy. This is someone who is medically inclined. They're researchers within this field, and they're trying to improve things. Without criticism, without pointing out mistakes, you can't improve anything anyway. So that you need it. It's healthy. It's a healthy check and balance. It's very important. But when people who don't know what they're talking about begin to make decisions, begin to conclude things from sources that are not verifiable and they cannot validate it, and and they rationalize things to themselves in ways that lack basic logic, then we run actual risks. When you decredit the medical system and you take away the credibility from doctors. I work in oncology. We have challenges we go through. This is our third challenge. Like, you can imagine that in diseases that kill people, it ranks number 3. Like diseases that are going to kill people for sure, and yet the third problem is that we have to deal with people who are suspicious of everything that we're saying, who are suspicious of me. They think I'm in bed with Big Pharma. I tell them, come visit my house for a moment. Well, drive by, see my car. You'll know if I'm in bed with anybody. Definitely not Big Pharma, yani. They think that somehow we are lying to them. We are holding back. They walk in with a printout of a study done somewhere in, I don't know, like in the jungle somewhere. A study that was published in a journal I've never heard of. The publication had to be translated by AI from some language that has not been spoken in the last 10 years. And they give me, can you give me this? No, I can't give you this. Why? Well, because I don't know who came up with this. And yes, maybe there was one case study, one person benefited from it. But what I'm offering you is a medication that has helped 40,000 people within trials. That's aside from the hundreds of thousands of people who benefited in real time, right? We've studied this, we know exactly how it works, we know why it works, we know when it stops working, and we understand its side effects. I have no idea. Yes, there's going to be a case study of someone going, sniffing a plant somewhere in the Amazon, and then I don't know, of course that's going to be the case. That of course, that they took a trip and they lived freely and they skydove and then the scans didn't show. Of course, these things happen. Even in our clinics, these things happen. Even in our clinics, and it'll be a case study. That'll be someone came in and they had stage 4 and it was spread everywhere. And before we even started treatment, it was gone. We don't know how. We don't know how. There are things that we don't understand. We research it. We take biopsies. We look at pathology. We try to figure it out because we want to learn, want to see what mutation they may have had. We look for reasons to try to understand it. The problem is when you don't have the proper foundation for a specific field of knowledge. You don't know what you're talking about. This exists in Islam as well. In Islam as well. You have conspiracy theorists who think that scholars are telling us that which we should not know or holding back information that we should know. There's a whole sect of Islam that is based on the fact that parts of the Quran have been hidden. A whole sect of Islam, a whole sect, hundreds of millions of people who are living based on the fact that they believe that parts of the Quran at some point were hidden or changed. Why? Because it's just easier that way. It's easier than dealing with the reality in front of you. It's easier than spending 20 or 25 years of seeking knowledge and learning in depth so that you can talk about things in an intelligent and educated way. Global warming, we still have people who believe that it's a myth. We still have people who think this is a conspiracy to, I don't know, hold back the Industrial Revolution and slow down the economy. And where does this stuff come from? It just comes from lack of knowledge. It comes from laziness, and it comes from the desire of certain things. So some key points that I want to share with you here. First of all, you have to differentiate between having confidence in a conspiracy and acknowledging the possibility while remaining vigilant and ready. There are two different things. The latter, is the mindset that I think Muslims should have. لَسْتُ بِالْخِبِّ وَلَا الْخِبُّ يَخْدَعُنِي, as Sayyidina Umar would say. I am not naive, and I don't like people fool me. I'm not someone who can be fooled easily. So my guard is up, and I'm paying attention, and I'm listening, and I'm learning. And it's not, but I don't believe everything I'm told from either side. I don't believe everything I'm told from people in authority, nor do I believe every theory of conspiracy that is going to be shared with me. All of it is going to be analyzed. All of it is going to be critically reviewed and thought about. And I'm going to bring in minds that I trust and minds that have knowledge about this to explain to me exactly what's happening. This is a very important. I am not here to tell you that they're all wrong and to stop listening to them altogether. But what I'm here to say, let's change the mentality. Being confident 100% this is what happened. 100% this theory is correct. That's one mentality, and that's a problem. That's a mindset that requires some correction and fixing. And then there's the one that acknowledges that there's a possibility, and they stay vigilant, they stay ready, and they educate themselves so that they figure out what is and what isn't. Embracing conspiracy theories as a mean to attribute blame and evade accountability. So this is what you get out of it. this is what we get out of conspiracy theories. We feel less of a blame on ourselves. When other people who are powerful, influential, impactful, wealthy, are conspiring against us, they're leaving us no hope. So I don't feel as blameworthy for the current situation that we are in as a group, or I am in as an individual. If I can prove that there's a group of people who conspired against me, then I don't have to blame myself anymore for my shortcomings, for my mistakes, for my lack of attentiveness, for my lack of effort. I can just say that this group was out to get me from the beginning, and that's why I'm failing right now. This is the gain. Because when we're talking about what the sources of conspiracy, the question that should come to mind is, well, why would we do it? Like, what's the point? Is it just the lack of comfortability with ignorance or with not knowing something? No, there's something in it for me. I get a hanger. I get to blame something. I don't have to accept accountability for my mistakes, for my shortcomings, for my lack of functionality. I don't have to accept that I am making mistakes, that I'm mediocre in my approach, that I didn't think things through, that I left out a lot of variables that I should have been attentive to. I can just blame a group that are doing it behind the scenes. Evading accountability is the biggest gain of conspiracy theories. Recognizing which conspiracy theories are being presented in order to hinder progress. This is a big one. So those who are conspiring against us, one of the tools that they use are conspiracy theories to make it more complicated. Like those who conspire against us, one of the tools that they will utilize is spreading amongst our ranks conspiracy theories. Because conspiracy theories, the right ones, will hinder progress, will hold us back, will make us feel powerless and useless. And when we feel that, the morale comes down, and then you see across the board a decrease in functionality, a decrease in commitment to the... So, for example, the example of what happened over the last 15 months in Gaza is a very good one. At the beginning, there's always this huge spike of energy and enthusiasm and commitment, both in time and money and voices being raised. And then all they do is just make sure they chronicize the problem long enough for conspiracy theories to exist within us, that it's not just them. Everyone's in bed with these forces, the West and some Arab Muslim countries. There's no hope of this going away. And then that brings down the morale, and then people stop spending as much time, and that's what they bargain on. Like they literally bargain on this. This is what they put all their chips on this occurring. When this doesn't occur, obviously, it becomes a problem, which is when the students actually didn't pick up their tents and leave, it became a problem. It became a global problem. It was on the news everywhere. The universities were absolutely embarrassed. They were very embarrassed about what was happening. Their finances were being exposed. They lost credibility. People lost interest in them. Why? Because what they were bargaining on didn't happen. What they were counting on, which is people taking in these conspiracy theories and causing the morale to drop and people to step back, it didn't occur. This generation is a little bit more educated than maybe mine was. So they held their ground. We are systematically required to work towards overcoming these type of challenges. Identifying what conspiracy theories are, which is why I talk about within my realm of work, and I'm very specific in what I do. I don't speak outside of what I know. At least I try to. My job is to talk about Islamic knowledge. The equivalent of conspiracy theories in Islamic knowledge is superstition. Is the jinn and the hasad and the ayn and the sihr and all this other stuff. That's the equivalent of conspiracy theories within Islamic knowledge. Hanging everything on that. As I talked about conspiracy theories, there is some reality to some of them. Just here, there's some reality to them. But what is that reality? Where are you going to get that knowledge from? Who's going to explain it to you? There is some reality. Of course, ayn haqq. And yes, there is jinn. And yes. But is it remotely close to what people believe? No, not even. Wallahi says not even a slither of what people believe. Why? Because it's the same problem. It exists in every field of life. In Islam, in religion, it exists as well. It just presents itself in the form of superstition. And people who are superstitious are equivalent to people who have conspiracy theories in the world, and then that's why nothing gets done. Because God forbid we are responsible for anything. And God forbid that we just don't know why this person's mind is not working well. We just don't know why. You have to be comfortable with that. People come and ask us in clinic questions all the time. Why is this happening? Why didn't I respond to this? I don't know. No one does. We don't know why. It just didn't work for you. Something about your biology just didn't allow it to work. I don't have the information yet. We haven't figured out the receptor. I didn't figure out the mutation. I don't know. Maybe one day we will, but I don't know right now. I don't understand it. None of them, by the way, ask me if could it be jinn. None of them. Not one of them. I say, Could that spot on my liver be jinn? No, none of them. Right? They accept, okay, we don't know. In life, it's the same thing. There's no difference. Sometimes someone gets sick and we don't know why. The need to explain things, even though we have no explanation, is the same problem. It's the same problem. It's the exact same problem. It's the parallel. In my world, this is what I fight. I push back against. I don't deny its existence. Of course not. It's ghaib. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explained it to me, so I accept it. But He explained exactly what parameters they carry. And those parameters are not being respected by Muslims. And we're allowing conspiracies to grow amongst ourselves. Ignoring conspiracies reflect a lack of awareness and strength. It really does. So I'm not here to do that and tell you to do that. If you ignore them completely, that means you're just not prepared. And you don't believe that you have enemies. And you don't believe that there are people who don't like what you stand for and what you're living for and where you're going in your life. No, there are. And they will push back against you. And they will conspire. And that's normal. Ignoring them altogether shows lack of awareness and shows weakness. And that's not what we're here to talk about here today. No, we're here to learn to be vigilant, to be aware, to be clear on what's happening around us, but at the same time not allowing these beliefs to take us into a place where we start making things up and we start beating ourselves, meaning we start defeating ourselves by ourselves. You're defeating yourself. The more you believe these things, that they're not divine decree. They're just people. Let's say that they're conspiring against you. They're human beings. They're flawed. They make mistakes. They will make mistakes. And if they're conspiring against you, then you do the same. Do the same. Protect yourself and conspire back against them. Why is their conspiracy divine and yours not? Why is their conspiracy always going to work and yours is always going to fail? That's not the truth. But we've allowed ourselves to believe that because we have become so powerless. And that's the change that has to happen. So how did the Quran address this issue? And in a nutshell, without taking too much time, the Quran focused on three basic mentalities, three basic Quranic themes. I'm going to talk about at least one of them within this month, inshallah, before Taraweeh. Self-accountability. Number one, you have to hold yourself accountable. The more you hold yourself accountable, the more self-critical you are, the less likely you are going to buy into these theories. The less likely you're going to accept them without proper analysis, without proper thought, without critically breaking it down and pushing back against every piece of information and making sure you verify them all. Because you are quicker to believe that you are not doing your job than to believe that others are diabolically working against you all the time and you are completely helpless. You're more likely to believe that, no, I am capable. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me tools. He's given me potential. If I'm not achieving it, then it must be my fault. And I go back and I look at what I did wrong. And then I figure out what I can do better. So that's how the Quran approaches this in general, that we are accountable. The second piece is that the Quran is very clear on the fact that you do have enemies. And that you need to identify who they are. In ghaib, الشيطان عدوك. And in the apparent world, في الظاهر, في الشهادة, there are enemies who declare themselves to you. Those who oppress you and take your wealth and take your land and take your freedom of religion. They are declaring themselves as your enemies. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even points out the munafiqeen and says, هُمُ الْعَدُوُّ, they are your enemy. فَاحْذَرْهُمْ, but this enemy you have to be cautious of, you can't fight. Shaitan you push against back. The other enemies you will have to sometimes in combat or in the political field, the political realm or the financial realm, you have to push back against them. Then you have the munafiqeen, who all you can do is protect yourself from them because you have nothing to do with them. You can't fight them, you can't remove them, they're part of the ummah. They say, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, they're dead weight that we carry. We can't really do much about them, aside from not allow them to harm us. So the Quran is very clear on identifying our enemies for us and telling us, make sure you know who they are. Because if you, إِنَّ مِنْ أَزْوَاجِكُمْ وَأَوْلَادِكُمْ عَدُوًّا لَكُمْ. Sometimes it'll be in your home. Sometimes in your house there'll be someone who is an enemy to you, who is pushing, who is trying to ruin your efforts, trying to take away your ability to achieve your goals. It's okay. That's normal. فَاحْذَرُوهُمْ, so be careful. وَإِن تَعْفُوا وَتَصْفَحُوا وَتَغْفِرُوا. In the house, the same thing. Don't fight them. That's not what you're going to do. You're going to be aware, and then you're going to forgive, and you're going to pardon, and you're going to let it go. وَإِن تَعْفُوا وَتَصْفَحُوا وَتَغْفِرُوا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. So Allah explains to us, here are your enemies, here's what you do with them. So number one, self-accountability. We don't need to give examples of that. That's all throughout the Quran. Identifying your enemies. And number three is organizing your efforts. وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَلَا تَنَازَعُوا فَتَفْشَلُوا وَتَذْهَبَ رِيحُكُمْ. Don't divide, and then you fail, because you're easier. The wolf can pick out. When the sheep are all over the place, when they're scattered and they have no plan, they don't work together, it's easy to pick them up. Easy to one by one, even though they outnumber and they're more powerful. Have you ever watched Ant Z before? And go watch ants. It's an animated Pixar movie. One of the few that I would say every child should watch it at one point. When the ants figure out that they're only being bullied by the grasshoppers because they just lack organization and they lack courage, and when they decide that they're going to do that, it's a beautiful movie. You should watch it. I watch it with my kids. Because it just teaches you something simple, that a lot of times the weakness that we feel is not from without, it's from within. And that piece is identifiable. The Prophet ﷺ's life is a great example for this. He was not naive, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He did not run his nation with this concept, because sometimes we conceptualize Muslims and Muslim leaders and Muslim scholars and Muslim as people who are just mashia subhani, just ya Allah, just walking. It doesn't completely unaware of everything around them. Ya Allah, al-barakah, moving al-barakah. Not at all. Not at all. There are people like that today, for sure. Not Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not at all. The Prophet alaihi wasallam had an intelligence facility within his group the day he made it to Medina, even before. Even in Mecca, he had people whose job were to spy, were to give him information, tell him where certain individuals are, what they're conspiring to do, what they're saying. That's why he knew alayhi sallam before things happened. That's why he picked up on things all the time before they occurred. That's why we knew the caravan of Abu Sufyan where it was. That's how we knew that they were coming for Uhud. That's how we knew they were coming for Khandaq. That's why he went to Khaybar. He had information. He had Talha bin Ubaidillah and Sa'id bin Zayd and Zubayr bin Awam. He had people whose job were to sweep back and forth in Arabia, listening and picking up information and coming and letting him know alayhi salatu wasalam, so he could plan appropriately. That's how we knew that Khalid was putting together an army, and he sent Abdullah bin Unais to take him out. And he knew what the army was made of. He knew how many people were there. He knew which tribes were there. He knew what it consisted of and how to actually break it down. He was not naive, alayhi salatu wasalam. That's why he sent 3,000 people to Mu'tah. That's why he moved towards Tabuk. When you look at him, alayhi salatu wasalam, he's in a brilliant military mind. A brilliant head of state, alayhi salatu wasalam. Literally, he built a country and a city that had no resources and had no hope of becoming a city whatsoever. That everyone was conspiring against. Everyone, imagine, everyone around him, alayhi salatu wasalam, was out to get him. And yet he was able to protect his group and build his empire, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Not buildings, but people. And able to bring forward a narrative. Why? Because he was not naive. Because he knew that people were conspiring. But he didn't sit around like us and complain. Oh, Quraysh, they'll never let us. No, they're not letting us do it. 100 of you, go to Abyssinia. They're not letting me doing it. I'll go find some other tribe to accept me. I'll go immigrate to another country, another city altogether. It's filled with disease. They have no resources. They're absolutely a mess on the inside. But at least I can start somewhere. He didn't say, oh, Quraysh will never let me do it. Oh, they'll never let us do it. Yeah, it's not up to them. It never was. It never was. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who controls. If you believe in control, then you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Human beings are just like you. They're trying their best to serve their interests, their best interests, or what they believe are their best interests. So do the same. Just do the same. Figure out what your best interests are and work towards them. And yes, some people will be conspiring against you, and be prepared for that, as he was, alayhi salatu wasalam. I'll end with this final piece. In order for a lot of these conspiracy theories to go away or to start to decrease, we need something. And I'll be honest, we need something. We need political representation or unity on the political front. As Muslims, we require that. We require it. Islam, a part of it doesn't function perfectly or fully until you have it. It doesn't mean that we need the Khilafah exactly the way it was back during the Rashideen time. To imagine that is again, in my opinion, naive. To imagine that we can go back to something that was similar to the time of Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Ali lacks realism, lacks pragmatism. You don't understand the reality of the world that we live in. But what is realistic and what is helpful and what we can obtain and achieve is a certain degree of political representation as Muslims. We need a united front. That's what we need. We need someone who speaks on our behalf as Muslims, someone who can pull strings for us as Muslims, someone who can put together joint efforts that work towards certain goals. Because we don't have that, because we are scattered in maybe 30 different countries, and every country has a political representation that does not represent us in any way at all, probably even the opposite of what our wishes are and what our desires are, we lack the ability to push back against agendas, against the agendas of people who are conspiring against us. We lack the ability to do that. So we require this. So this has to be something that we work towards achieving as Muslims, with an open mind, with an understanding that it won't exactly look like it did 1,000 years ago. And quite frankly, we shouldn't want that to be the case, because it wasn't perfect. It wasn't perfect 1,000 years ago. It wasn't. Yes, the time of the Rashideen, but that was a special time. These were Ashab Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam who were governing. We have to understand when there's specificities to the story. I can't look back at the time of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam and hope for something exactly like that, because Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was there. I can't look back and say I want it like the way of Abu Bakr. Bring me Abu Bakr. Bring me Umar. Bring me Uthman. Bring me Ali, and then we can talk. Aside from that, what we're looking for is some degree of political representation, some degree of, some form of united front that allows our wishes, our narrative, our voice to be heard. This is the problem that we have here today. They take a microphone, they put it in your face as a Muslim and say, do you support blah, blah, blah? Because we don't have a narrative. Because we can't say, no, you need to listen to what we have to say here. We are educated human beings, and we are a part of this country, and we are Canadians. And if the political movement, if the narrative of this country is the sum of the narratives that exist for the people, especially those who are educated, then you have to listen to me. You have to give me a spot at the table, and you have to listen to me. They're not going to do it. Say, oh, see, conspiracy theories. No one offers you a spot on the table for free. No one does that. You wouldn't do it. It makes no sense. That's not how the world works. You want a spot on the table, you have to earn it. You want a spot on the table to speak your mind, you have to earn it. We haven't earned it yet, because we have no organized efforts towards that. Because our children have to be either engineers or doctors or lawyers or dead. And if we don't allow people to express themselves a little bit better, if we don't allow them to go out and get into the different fields of life and insert themselves and support them as they do that, so they can represent us, so that we can earn our spot at the table, so we can speak. It's easy to conspire against someone who's not sitting at the table. If we're sitting together and Fulan is not there, it's easy to talk about them. And it's easy to hate on them. And it's easy to interpret their actions and their words in ways that suit our agenda, because they're not there. But the moment they walk into the room and sit down, everyone shuts up. Everyone quiets down. And when he starts to speak, they have to listen to him. And now that his narrative has to be incorporated into the general narrative. We are not at the tables. We're not sitting at the tables. We're not there. We're outside. So yes, they will continue to speak about us however they want and conspire against us, because we don't exist there. It's only when we force ourselves to exist there again, when we bring ourselves to the table. You don't like how TDVSB is dealing with curriculums in school? Fine. Get people on the board to speak out. Get people to push back. Get parents to get on the boards that are available. We don't have that. How do you expect them to listen to you? Like, why would they? Why would they incorporate your beliefs? Hey, lillah, subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would just say, you know what? They're not here, but let's go and learn their faith and add it into our curriculum. You seriously think the world works like that? You wouldn't do that yourself. No one would. If you're not here, I don't have time to incorporate you into this. I should, but I don't. It's too complicated. You have to be here with me. You have to bring your point of view to this. If you haven't earned if there's 40,000 of you and you have not earned your spot here, then you don't care enough about this. So cut the act. Stop acting like you care so much. If you did, you would make sure one of you were sitting here, and it would push back. The police force and the political realm and the federal government and the provincial government, the same thing. What are our options? Bad and worse and horrible and despicable, and right? I'm just choosing between these options. Fulan corrupt, Fulan is hateful, Fulan. What do I have? And if there's a Muslim, when we open their doors for a moment, we get stabbed in the back so hard that we almost suffocate, because we don't have proper representation amongst us. Instead of the problem with conspiracy theories, that's at the end of my session, inshallah. The problem with conspiracy theories is what it does to the morale and to the mentality of people who accept them. It takes away from them their grit. It takes away from them the sense of initiative. It takes away from them the belief in themselves that they are capable of bringing change forward. I feel, this is just my feeling, and on this note, that these 15 months, yes, we've lost a lot of beautiful human beings, and we've watched them suffer. And it's been absolutely heartbreaking and heart-wrenching to see it. But it seems, to me at least, to have kindled a little bit of a fire in the hearts of this next generation, that you can make change. you can actually impact how things are going to happen. Not as quickly as you would like to, not as powerfully as you want to, but you can make enough change that if we stick to it consistently long enough, that we can actually move the needle in a way that will be meaningful, that will stop this from happening again. Or believe conspiracy theories. Or just do that. Another option as well. And I'll end with that. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. جزاكم الله خير وبارك الله فيكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.